Hello and welcome back to season 2, episode 109 of Paranormal NL podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Pocket Cast. I'm your host, Jen. For tonight's show, let's give a big shout out to who introduced me to tonight's guest. A big shout out to Coley Weber and her Coley and Marquise talk show, who was on P&L Podcast Season 2, Episode 83. Let's send out some hugs to everyone again around the globe dealing with the crazy weather, summer fires, earthquakes, and hurricanes. Now it's time to pull up that cozy chair and a nice cold one and listen in to your favorite podcast. Paranormal NL Podcast is a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. P&L Podcast also believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the world. A big thank you again to all the P&L Podcast alumni guests from season 1 and 2, and of course our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, metaphysical, UFO, cryptid creatures, folklore, historical, military, or tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my P&L podcast? Please reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail. After your episode, you'll become part of the P&L Podcast Alumni Network. Don't forget, you can also share your stories anonymously, and you can also listen in with your smart TV for free on that Spotify app. And make sure you click on the Spotify bell or subscribe or like or follow along on whatever platform you're listening in on to get updates for new episodes. Head on over to Facebook and join our group, Paranormal NL Podcast Group. Find upcoming new P&L episodes in the featured section of the group. We're listening to our fans. Paranormal NL Podcast is coming soon to YouTube, is now on Instagram, and P&L now also has a Facebook page for fans who are not on Instagram for Instagram Reel Drops, and a spot for the P&L Bog Team Facebook Go Lives. That's right. Stay tuned for a new branch of Paranormal ML podcast with the Bog Team. Boots on the ground paranormal investigation team doing local historical investigations in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our fans asked us, Paranormal NL podcast merch and the new P&L Bog Team merch is now available on TeePublic with lots of different logos, designs, and swag items that fans asked to choose from, like handbags and cell phones covers and all that other stuff. Now, let's get on with the show. I'm going to add on the Streamyard stage here tonight, I've got Mr. Jim Goodall from Arizona. Welcome, Jim.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. We've had an incredibly warm summer so far. I think it's been a handful of days that we've been under 100 degrees Fahrenheit. To you Canadians out there that aren't metric, and that's from mid-May through now. We've only had, I say, just a handful of days where the high has been below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it drains you after a while. But
it gets pretty hot down in Arizona. Hey, Jim.
Yeah, but I spent 27 years in Minnesota. I spent 3.5 years in Alaska, Colorado, and whatever. The one thing I never wanted to do again, I never wanted to shovel snow.
I don't blame you.
So when I retired from Hawaii, I couldn't retire in Hawaii. It was just too expensive.
And now, Jim, let's go back to tell the people listening all over the world who you are.
My name is Jim Goodall. I'm a retired Air Force Air National Guard Master Sergeant.
Thank you for your service, Jim.
My pleasure. I had 27 years military service. Most of it was with the Minnesota Air National Guard. And most of the time I was there, I was the wing or state staff historian. And I've always wanted to be I wanted to be a history teacher when I was growing up, but I knew I would have students like me, and I would probably end up in prison for murder or mayhem, one of the two. So I decided it was in my best interest to not become a teacher. because I have a real low tolerance for young children who think they know everything and who have no respect for those of us that are older than them, that have been down the road long. But other than that, I'm a published author. I have 29 books in print. My area of expertise are low observables, also known as stealth. And part of that is the Blackbird was the first generation stealth, the F-117, which was a third generation, the B-2, which was a fifth generation. And then my other books are on submarines. And my airplane friends say, what are you doing with airplanes? I mean, with submarines when you're into stealth airplanes?
But I got to ask you, Jim, those pictures that I got up on the teaser, folks, go look on the featured section of Paranormal NL Podcast group. In the featured section, look at all the pictures Jim sent. Tell us about, I got to ask about that boat. That's a stealth boat now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I've been blessed to have done a lot of interesting things and meet interesting people. Probably the most interesting person in this group, and I'm into all sorts of stuff, but in the paranormal, UFOs, things that go bump in the night part, is I've been a friend of Bob Lazar's before he went to work out in the desert. And before he went to work out in the desert, you couldn't put a gun to his head to convince him that UFOs were real. And
now tell folks, listen, Jim, who don't know who Bob Lazar is, fill them in.
Or if you're into UFOs, you don't know who Bob Lazar is, you've been sleeping under a rock. He was the first whistleblower, and this is 1989 that he came out and said he was working on reverse engineering of a recovered alien spacecraft. And his job was to determine how the anti-gravity system worked he called it the sports model. He was in a place called S4, which is in the inside the Papoose Range, which is the backdrop for Area 51. And he was there for, I think, a year and a half. I actually had his W-2, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But they threatened him. His wife died in some. She drove off the road, much like Karen Silkwood, out in the desert, and her neck was broken.
No,
they don't know what, they don't know why or whatever. But he felt that he had to go public to protect his life, and he did. And I met him through probably the most infamous UFO character and pilot on the planet, and that was John Lear.
John Lear? Tell us more about John Lear, Jim.
I first met John Lear through a mutual friend, John Anderson Testers. This is back in 73, 74. So a long time ago. We're talking about 50 years ago. And my friend John Andrews he was working. I met him because he had gone to the Air Force Museum to do some measurements on a Blackbird that was there, and he asked a mutual friend, Dave Menard, who knows more about the Blackbird than anybody that can talk about it? He said, you got to get hold of Jim Goodall. And he did, and we were instant friends. And we were friends up until the day he passed away to cancer. But he said, I have a friend in Las Vegas, and you got to meet him because you're as crazy as he is. So he introduced me to John Lear. And I've known John Lear. I knew John Lear from about 74, 75 until he passed away. I think it's been 2 years now. It was either 23 or 22 when he passed away. And I saw him about a month before he passed. And it just broke my heart. It just
Oh,
did.
I'm sorry, Jim.
Because here's the most incredible character on the planet, and he was dying of. He was a medical mess. He had been in 3 airplane crashes. He had shattered both of his feet. But John and I were just like the Lone Ranger and Tano, I guess you want to call it that. Those of you who are old know who the Lone Ranger and Tano is, or Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street, one of the
Right,
two.
yeah. So tell us more about the Blackbird and the work with Bob Lazar.
On the Blackbird, I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base from September '62 until I think it was August of '64, and I had a set of orders. This is in February of '64. I was a communication specialist. I specialized in telemetry, ground-based telemetry, and I got to Edwards Air Force Base there in Southern California, and I was there to support 3 programs: the YC-141 Starlifter, the XB-70 Valkyrie, that was a 6-engine Mach 3 bomber. They built 2 of them, crashed 1, and a classified program, which turned out to be the Blackbird. And on March 10th, 1964, at 3:15 in the afternoon, I saw my first Blackbird, and I have never been the same since. I mean, I was 18 years old. It was just before I turned 19. And I was in the military. If you work a lot of overtime, you don't get paid overtime. You get comp time for overtime.
Right.
And
yeah, I used to work with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I remember that.
And I had a lot of extra days. So it was a Tuesday afternoon. I'm taking the Northrop shuttle. They had an Italian Piaggio. It's a gull wing pusher prop. This is 1964. It's a long time ago.
Okay.
And it flew from Edwards Air Force Base into Hawthorne, California, which is a suburb of LA. And I hear this roar, and I see dust and debris blown across Rogers Dry Lake, and I went running down the flight line and looked over to the XB-70 engine run-up test pad, and there was a black airplane that I thought was the X-15 rocket airplane, but the people were too small. And all of a sudden they yelled, "Hey, we're loading." So I had to run back up the flight line, got in. I'm on the right-hand side of the airplane. We take off directly over Rogers Dry Lake, and we came across and we bank, and I'm looking straight down on the top of a Blackbird. This is a 2,200 mile an hour airplane that could fly to 85,000 feet 60 years ago. And we don't have anything that can touch it today that we know of. Right. Yeah. And that, seeing the Blackbird at my young age of 18 years old, and again, I'm 79 now, really, really changed my whole course of my life. And as it turned, because of my passion for the Blackbird, and I started digging everything I could get on the Blackbird. So I spent 50 years pulling together everything, and I came out with one of the best books on the Blackbird from Shepherd Publishing. But in the process, I became friends with Ben Rich. Ben Rich was Kelly Johnson, who founded the Skunkworks. Ben Rich was his right-hand man. And when Kelly retired in 72, 73 timeframe, Ben became the president and general manager of Lockheed Skunkworks. And for whatever reason, I don't even know how I got on his good list. We talked about once a quarter for over 20 years. And I've had a lot of very, very interesting conversations with Ben, but most of it was just we're just keeping up with who's who and who's doing what.
Right. Anything interesting that you want to say that's not going to get me
thrown
off the road and my neck snapped?
Yeah, one of my last, well, actually the very last time I talked to Ben, He was at USC Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was dying of esophageal cancer. They figured that the solvents and the chemicals they used in the low observable, the stealth coatings, was incredibly toxic. And even if you got a whiff of it, what the heck was that? It's too late. Your body has already been damaged. And being that, Ben's office was right in the Skunkworks, he was, everybody in there got exposed to it. And I have a friend of mine who was one of the first listed guys on the F-117. He said everybody he knows has cancer, usually intestinal polyps. But I was talking to Ben. We were talking about our mutual friend John Andrews and John Lear. And after about 45 minutes, I could tell he was wearing out. And he said, Jim, we have things out in the desert. Now, he wasn't talking about Area 51. S4 maybe, but he didn't say. He said, Jim, we have things out in the desert that's 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. And I can comprehend a hell of a lot. And Ben knows that. He said, if you've seen movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. And
Interesting.
I said, Ben, I mean, this. If anybody knows anything about the spookiest things on the planet, it's to be the guys at the Skunkworks.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, Skunkworks and Lockheed would know for sure. So you really, I mean, it does sound like a lot of reverse technology stuff to me, DARPA.
Well, I think it was 1993, Ben Rich gave a talk at UCLA. It was their aeronautical school. It was their graduate class, and he was the keynote speaker. And he was talking about technology and this and that. And at the end of it, and it's written down, it was part of his prepared speech, so it wasn't an off the cuff statement. He said, today, that's 1993, so what's that, 30 years ago? He said, we have the ability to take ET home. Think about that statement. We have the ability to take ET home. And
so, Jim, we have the ability to take ET home. What do you think about when you hear stuff like that? Is that?
I mean, that just blew me away.
Well,
so in other words, he said, we have the ability to fly through the stars or to the stars, but our government has it buried in incredibly black programs that they will not release for whatever reason. And I think it irritated Ben. I think that's one reason he was so talkative near the end of his life. But when I asked him on his deathbed, you want to expand upon that, the typical Ben Rich was no. And then he had the nerve to die on me 10 days later. So,
and he wouldn't expand.
But I cherish my friendship with Ben. I was exposed to some of the most incredible people. I mean, of the 11 heads of the Skunkworks, I've talked to or interviewed or know 6 of the 11. And Jack Gordon is one of them. And when I did my 75 years of Lockheed Skunkworks, which was I'm covering 75 years of what they've been building. I covered 43 programs. There's probably 43 programs I know nothing about and probably never will. But it was a fun part of my life. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've done a lot of crazy things in my life.
Jim, when you hear people talk about Space Force, what do you think about?
Space Force?
Yes.
I think we've been traveling the stars a lot. I mean, for a number of generations. It's just that it's buried so deep that you and I we'll never know about it. I mean, stuff that they're releasing, the stuff they've released it over the years, the programs had been gone for 20 years. So anything our government shows you today, whether it's technology or something else, it's more than likely it is something
old tech.
that came to it. The program came to an end 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
So
what do you think about these Tic Tac videos and and all that? What do you think about them? Do you think they're old tech?
I think that a majority, and I'm talking about 85 to 90% of the unknown aerial phenomena, UFOs, flying saucers, whatever it is, the general public sees in our military chases. I have to believe that 85 to 90% of those are man-made.
Right.
And they call it, someone say, well, if they call it a UAP, it's man-made. If they call it a UFO, it's theirs. It's just not ours.
Well, I hear them saying UAP a lot, unidentified
Right.
aerial phenomenon, because there's a lot of these CE5 events. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's your take on that, Jan?
Like I say, 5%, maybe 10% of what you see out there are alien, or even less than that. But all it takes is just one. If one can be proven to come from a different world, whether it's in our solar system or whether it's somewhere else, that's all you need. We have been on this planet's been here for 4 billion years. They keep upping the age of the universe. For decades, it was 13.4 billion years old. And then with the James Webb Space Telescope, they were looking at things that were a couple billion light years past the 13.4 billion years. So they came to the conclusion that, well, the universe is like 27 billion years old. And then there was just another one here just a little bit ago. They're saying, well, now, further investigation, the universe may be as much as 50 billion years old. They don't know.
Well, in relation to that, what you're talking about, what do you think about time travel? Do you think it's us?
Yeah, a lot of them. I think it's you and I coming back from the future, trying to knock some sense into those of us humans that want to destroy the planet.
Yeah, because they always hang out around military installations, don't they?
Yeah, as do I. I mean,
I love military installations too, Jen.
back in the mid '80s, I was with the Minnesota Air Guard. I was a traditional weekender. I was a vice president of a company.
Right.
That did telemetry and control systems. It was a French company, and but in my one weekend a month, I was a guardsman. But I got activated for Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and I was tickled to do that. I actually wanted to go to Saudi Arabia. I wanted to be where history was being made. When I was in the service back in the '60s, in the active duty, I volunteered to go to Vietnam 7 times. You know where they sent me? Alaska. That's about as far away as the jungles of Southeast Asia as you can get.
What do you think about the Black Triangle in Alaska? True, false?
Black triangles, most of them, I believe are man-made, but not all of them. I mean, again, our government, such as they are, they feel that information would scare the hell out of you. Now, Tim Burchett, who's congressman from the 2nd Congressional District in Tennessee, I had a chance to briefly talk to him when I was back in D.C. last June with Dr. Greer and my longtime friend Michael Schratt. And he said that he has seen some stuff. And that's all he would say. He would say stuff. He didn't describe it. He said it shocked the hell out of me. And the American public and the world in general is not ready for what he saw.
Do you think it was biological or just technological?
It had to be biological.
Hmm.
I mean, he said it frightened him. Now, Dr. Greer, he had his disclosure event last June with the Washington Press Corps. I was there. I spoke for just 10 words, but I was there primarily to support Michael Schratt. He's a very dear friend of mine, and he was just stressed out until I said, "Yeah, I can make it." And he said all of a sudden his stress level just went to zero because he knew he could fall back. I was there. I was sort of his parachute, but I was there just to give him encouragement. But Greer has access to a lot of things, and over the course of a year and a half, Michael Schratt scanned 50 or 60,000 packets of information, all related to UFO and UFO recoveries. And they're all available on Dr. Greer's website at no cost.
You're talking about Stephen Greer, correct?
Pardon?
You're talking about Steve Greer?
Yes, Dr. Stephen Greer.
Yes.
The disclosure event. And
so 50 or 60 packets, you can go look at Greer's website.
60,000. 60,000 packets of information. He scanned them all in PDF. So all you have to do is put a word, and you'll find if you put Area 51, anything that mentions Area 51 will pop up. And if you say Bob Lazar, everything about Bob Lazar would pop up if it's listed. Now, one of the things about Bob Lazar, he was the first whistleblower, and I asked him, "Are you gonna go to DC and tell them what you did back in the early '80s or the late '80s?" He said no. So the bastards had an opportunity 30 years ago, and all they did was try to destroy me. So no, they can go kiss my butt. I'm not going to help them out at all.
When he said they tried to destroy me, did he go into detail on what they did to him?
Well, he's gone into very deep detail, and he has a new movie coming out. It's from a group out of Montreal, and it's Luigi Venatelli, I think, is the president of the group, and they are using the newest, highest tech animation and AI to give you and I a feel of what it was like to actually go into the hangar where the sports model was, to look inside of it. And it's a full-length movie. And Bob said he's seen some shorts from it, just little bits and pieces. He said it was so realistic, he got goosebumps.
Oh, wow.
He said it was unbelievable. And one of the things, well, Bob Lazar isn't real. Well, how do you know? Because I said so. Well, he said, I can say that I went to the moon, doesn't mean I went there. But when I was activated for Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I was in the Pentagon. At the time, I was a tech sergeant. I was an E6. And I had a down day. There was nothing happening. I don't know if what they were happening in Iraq, but I just had a slow day. So I had Bob Lazar's W-2.
Right.
And of when he got paid when he was working at S4. And I tried to find the Department of the Navy that paid him, and it didn't show up anywhere. There was stuff that was close, but not verbatim. So I think it was Naval Investigative Services. I found where they were in the Pentagon. I go in there, doors open. I'm in uniform. I have my light blue shirt, all my ribbons, fresh haircut, shine shoes. I mean, I was looking good. And there's a Navy Lieutenant JG sitting behind the desk. And he said, "Sarge, what can I do for you?" I said, "Sir, can you tell me where this Department of the Navy is located?" I gave him Bob's W-2, and he looks at it. He said, "Excuse me, Sergeant, I'll be right back." He walks into the 2-star's office. He's in there 15, 20 seconds. I mean, not very long at all. And he comes out and said, the Admiral will see you now. Now, those of you who have been in the military or know the Navy more than, the Air Force or maybe the Marine Corps would be even more strict. But no Navy 2-star is going to talk to an Air Force / Air Guard enlisted puke unless the world's coming to an end.
I love what you just said. Enlisted puke. Yep, that's roundabout. Yeah, you said it.
And I walk into his office. I give him a sharp salute. He doesn't say at ease. He said parade rest. So I'm standing there, and he's shaking. He said, Sergeant, I don't know where you got this, but if I ever see your face cross the threshold of my office ever again, you'll be the most sorriest son of a bitch in NCO in the United States military. Do you understand me, Sergeant? I said, yes, sir. And with that, he put Bob's W-2 into the shredder and said, you're dismissed. I gave him a sharp salute, did an about face, and walked out, and I went, whoa. I pulled his chain pretty good.
You shredded it. Hey?
So these are the people that I've associated with most of my adult life. Another one is Dave Fruhoff. He's a retired Air Force colonel. He flew the SR-71, and he didn't live that far from my dad. My dad was director of engineering at the wind tunnel complex in Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Okay.
And Dave,
my brother did a lot of work with wind tunnels. Yeah.
Yeah, Dave lived in Lynchburg, which is 11 miles from Tullahoma, and it's also the home of Jack Daniels. But it's a dry country. It's a dry county. You can't buy booze in that county, but they make the best sour mash whiskey there is. So I called him up and said, "Hey, I had known Dave for 15, 20 years as an acquaintance." I said, I'm right down the road in Tullahoma. Can I come by and interview you? He said, sure, come on down. So we get together and we're talking about a lot of things. And I finally asked him, said, Dave, do you believe in UFOs? And he said, absolutely positive they do exist. I said, I was expecting him to say no when I said, would you want to expand upon that? And he said, sure. He said it was late 72, early 73. He's on a night mission. He's it's 11 o'clock at night. And he's at, I think, 78,000 feet at Mach 2.7, which is about 1,500, 1,800 miles an hour. And it's the 3/4 moon off to the left. He's going straight. And all of a sudden, he gets something catches his eye. He's getting a glint off an object that has edges. It's not round, it's not saucer shaped, but it has edges and it's reflective. It's 5 or 6 miles off to his right side of the airplane and 5,000 or 6,000 feet above. So he wanted to get a closer look. He gets on secure voice. He calls Kadena because he's flying out of Kadena, Okinawa. And he said, you got hold of the command post. He said, we do have another bird up. I said, no, you were at the briefing. It's just you. And he said, well, I have company. I'm going to go take a look. So he advanced the throttles. At Mach 2.7, you're an absolute minimum afterburner. The airplane just likes to go, to fly fast. So right. He advances the throttles. He's taking about a 10-degree bank, and he's climbing up towards this other object. And his backseater finally gets on the intercom and says, hey, Dave, they said, we have company up here. I said, yeah, I'm going to see if I can get a closer look. So he said he was still 1,000 or so feet below it and still about a mile or so away. He didn't want to open his visor, but he was getting a lot of glints from the instruments inside his faceplate of his David Clark suit. And he didn't want to open it up because Murphy's Law says as soon as you do that, you're going to have a decompression and you're going to be dead.
Right.
So he was trying to see if he can see the shape of this object with all the stars that are up there. and with this thing by blanking out the stars, and that he couldn't get a size or shape of it. So this thing takes off at about a 30-degree angle of attack. And he said he was able to sort of keep track of it, said between 180 and 200,000 feet in altitude. And he said it left him he was going Mach 2.8 at the time, maybe 2.9. He said it left him like he was heading the other direction. So he figured it was leaving him at least Mach 8 to Mach 12.
Mach 8 to 12. Can a human do that? What's the highest Mach a human can do?
Well, when you go into space, when you go up in the space shuttle, you're going Mach 25.
Right, but you're not banking at that.
Yeah, so it's the acceleration that hurts you, or the sudden stop. If you
if you were to go bank at that,
run into a ground or run into the something else. But the thing about it, when he retired from the Air Force in '79, because of his clearance, he had a Q clearance. It was above top secret, and then became a civilian. It was a Q clearance, and he got a job as facility manager at Area 51.
Okay.
And I asked him about, and he said, "You don't go in there." He knew most everybody there just because he's been in the classified airplane environment. But you don't go in there when you first get there and you ask a bunch of questions, because they'll pull your clearance and fire you. So he said he waited for, till he's there about a year. And he's talking to a bunch of guys at the club one evening. And he said, "Hey, did we ever build anything or flight test anything here that flew at Mach 12, Mach 8, Mach 8 to Mach 12, maybe faster?" And everybody, no. So the only thing that Dave the conclusion he could come to was the fact that what he saw was a real live alien UFO. But go back to...
Could it be another country, Jim?
Pardon?
Could it have been another country with that tech, though?
No, there isn't any. There's only two countries that could possibly do that, and that's Russia and us. And the Russians are great on metallurgy. They're good on other things, but most of the airplanes, when you get up and take a close look at them, they look like an old John Deere tractor. I mean, the panels don't mesh properly and everything else because it isn't important. Our stuff is like when we build an airplane or a weapon system, it's like a fine Swiss watch.
What do you think about China, though? Didn't they go to the dark side of the moon?
Well, we had the ability to do that, but for whatever reason, we didn't have the will. Right now, China is probably in the worst shape that they've ever been. I'm talking about politically and financially.
Right.
Evergrande, the world's largest real estate conglomerate, is ready to go bankrupt, go Chapter 7. And that's decimating the Chinese economy. And if it does go belly up, you're gonna see the country of China file for bankruptcy because they have extended themselves so much. A year ago, there were
Britain.
There were factories in China that were going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
How about the Brits, Jim?
No. I mean, I have a lot of dear friends that, who live in England who are Brits, but they were good at building empires back, starting 400 years ago on up until the 1940s when it sort of came to an end. That one time there was, the saying was the sun never sets on the British Empire. Now you look at Harry down in California, and that's that slug he's married to. When he was back in the UK, when his dad was, King Charles was, King Chucky. King Charles was, he had his bout with cancer. Charles only gave him 30 minutes of, I don't know if that was face to face. It may have been on the phone. The royals don't want him. especially they don't want the wench he's married to. I look at her, and I don't want to get political, but
I was just gonna say, yeah, let's not get political.
I
Let's
just don't.
switch it back to the military interesting stuff we were talking about. Weren't you also the former associate curator of the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum?
Correct. I did that for 4 years. That was, if I hadn't had so many ex-wives, I could have done it. I would have done it for free.
Oh, Jim, that's hilarious. How many ex-wives do you have?
It was the most fun I had. I lived in Waikiki. I lived right next to the Hilton Hawaiian Village. Waikiki was my neighborhood. I rode my Harley to and from Ford Island, where I went to work. I tripled the amount of aircraft that the museum had from the time I got there until I retired in October of 2013. And I truly do miss Hawaii. I mean, it's a beautiful place. The people are wonderful. You can't get anything done because you might get in the way of surfing or fishing or hunting or whatever. But it's a wonderful place, and the people are wonderful. Anywhere else in the country, if you're trying to get, it's rush hour, and you're trying to get into the freeway, most times they won't let you. But in Hawaii, they'll open a big thing. You can come right in.
Come on in.
Yeah, but don't to go into an intersection when the light first turns green, because the opposing direction is, well, the green light hasn't been green long enough, and the red light is not bright enough yet. So we're going to keep on going. So you usually count to 2 or 3 before you either step off the curve or drive into the intersection. And they used to have red light cameras, and they finally had to pull them because the only people getting tickets were the politicians and the important people, the regular Joes and stuff. No, but it is a wonderful place, and I've been
Bob,
back.
let's switch gears again. Tell me about your National Observatory work.
I was a docent at Kitt Peak National Observatories for a couple of years.
Can you tell the people listening what a docent is?
They're just a guide. We're just trained on what telescopes we're going to be showing, of what they're capable of doing and what they did. And Kitt Peak has the largest concentration of optical telescopes of any place in the country. It has 22 optical telescopes. They're at 7,000 feet. And we actually gave tours on 3 of the 22 telescopes. I've been to all of them as a docent, just to be informed of what's there. But you had the McMath Pierce Solar Telescope. From the heliostatic on top to the primary mirror down below is 500 feet down into a mountain, and then it's reflected back into what they call the solar lab.
I'd love to be able to get my hands on that and go up in the lab. Did you play around with it or look at some of the tech or any of the stuff they were looking at?
Oh, I had, we had a chance to look at the sun. Unfortunately, the couple of years I was there the sun was at a solar minimum. I would love to be up there today.
Yes.
Where we're gonna get hit with a corona mass ejection.
I was just gonna say lots of CMEs, right?
Yeah, and that's going to happen in probably the next week to 10 days. There's supposed to be a big one. A number of them are supposed to hit Earth.
Do you think that's what's messing up all the weather and stuff with our magnetic fields?
Well, I mean, the sun is what creates the weather. Well, it's hot. Yeah, you ever see that big that big yellow white ball up in the sky? Well, it's a ball of fire, and 0.5% increase or decrease in the heat coming from the sun could mean either you're gonna turn into a desert or you're gonna turn into an ice age. So that big glowing ball up there, it isn't someone's SUV. It isn't a coal-fired power plant. They can say all they want. What caused the last two ice ages that we know of to end. The Earth, I mean, at one time, Chicago was under a mile of ice.
Yes.
It's not there now. What happened to it?
Well,
The Earth ice age came to an end, and that stuff melted. The ice age from the last ice age is still coming to an end, even though we're now starting to cool down. But
what do you think of
the glaciers are melting because that's what happens when an ice age ends. Now, if all of a sudden the ice, if the accumulation gets and we start seeing glaciers grow, then maybe that's an indication that we're going into our next ice age. It goes in cycles,
right?
And you and I and the federal government of the United States or Canada or China or whatever it is not going to create enough pollution. They can make it unhealthy for you and I, but they're not going to, in my opinion, create enough pollution to change the weather.
What do you think about the weather seeding?
The what?
The cloud seeding?
Well, that's been talked about forever.
Or HAARP?
HAARP. I have friends who lived in Lahaina, and I don't know why that it's you don't hear about it anymore. I mean, it wiped out a whole entire town. Now, Lahaina, none of the buildings had sprinkler systems. They were, most of the buildings were 100, 150 years old. They're in a tropical environment because they've been in the same family for decades, if not centuries. Probably not many people had insurance on their businesses, and the winds in Hawaii can get pretty wicked. And there was 100-mile-an-hour wind coming from the east to the west. I mean, from the west to the east, and all it would take is one lithium-powered scooter or dune buggy or car to cause a fire, and it happens on a regular basis all over the country.
You hear much, Jim, about chemtrails with the planes?
Yeah, but I'm going to finish my what I'm saying about Lahaina.
Lahaina.
Yeah, once the fire started on the west end of Lahaina, and is surrounded by what used to be former sugarcane fields. And there's a buffalo grass there that dries out, and you look at it wrong and it'll catch on fire. The whole thing, there's something evil happened to Lahaina. And I don't know if I'll live long enough to see the answer to it. But
where's Lahaina again, Jim?
That's in Maui.
Okay. It sounded like it sounded like
it was just a cute little town right on the water. I mean, it was funky. It was old and funky, and that's the sad part of what's happening in Oahu. Now, I lived in Waikiki, and we had the International Village, which used to be old and funky. Well, now it's all glass and stainless steel. They kept all the trees, the banyan trees and whatever, and built stuff around them. But the flavor of Hawaii isn't there in that place. They still call it the International Market Center, but it doesn't hold a candle to the funk. I mean, that's what I loved about Hawaii when I first started going there. Is just this is a different age. This is a different world. And Hawaii is a different place. It's truly is paradise. Expensive paradise, but it truly is paradise.
So, in relation to that, Jim, you've been around the world. You've seen and done a lot of things. You've discussed, things with a lot of important people and interesting people. Jim, if people want to follow you and your books and all your information, where do they go look for Jim Goodall?
Well, I don't have a website. You know, I'm on Facebook and I'm on X. But if you want my books now, if you're into airplanes, spooky airplanes, I'm talking about the F-117, the B-2. I flew the B-2 simulator also, the Blackbird, all those plus spooky submarines. Go to Amazon.com, punch in books by James C. Goodall, just like it sounds. And most of my books will show up. All my books since the last 15 years have all been hardbound. So they start at $35. My most expensive one is my 75 Years of the Lockheed Skunkworks. And that's a 5.5 pound book.
Ooh,
yeah, and,
I love me a good book. Which one's your most popular book, Jim?
My SR-71 book by Sheffer. It's hardbound.
SR-71?
Yeah, it's 224 pages. I cover all 50 manned Blackbirds. I covered the D-21 program, which at the time was more classified than the Manhattan Project. That was a project that developed the atomic bomb. And I've interviewed or met most everybody who flight tested it, who crashed it, who worked on it, who developed the engines, developed the avionics. And it's been an obsession of mine since March 10th, 1964. So I'm acknowledged as being the foremost authority as far as history goes of the Blackbird program.
Thank you for sharing all of this exciting information with us, Jim. Is there any other things that you want to share with us before you go?
Well, I just I'm delighted to be on your program.
We're honored to have you, and again, thank you so much for your service.
And if anybody wants me on the program, unless I have a conflict with a particular date, I'm retired. I don't do much. I can't travel much anymore. My wife has Alzheimer's, so I'm
sorry.
Yeah, me too. But she's the love of my life, so it's what I got to do. I'm going to be her rock, and hopefully they keep talking about cures for this stuff. Maybe we'll be fortunate enough, and we'll find.
Yeah,
something.
maybe I lost my aunt to that too. So
yeah,
a lot of people on this planet understand that. But we really want to thank you for being on the show today.
It was my pleasure.
And everybody follow Jim Goodall, check out his books, check out his work, and listen in and tell everybody about it and to share the program with him.
And I'm on Facebook.
Yes.
It's Jim Goodall-71, I think would get you right to me, but you would know it's mine because it either has something political or it has mostly airplane stuff, usually Blackbird stuff.
Yes, you'll enjoy Jim's stuff. He's really good. So, Jim, without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye to the fans, but stick around with me. We're going to have a quick off-air chat. I'm going to stop recording, and this will air tonight. I'll get it produced and out tonight. I'm going to stop recording. Say goodbye to the fans, Jim.
Yeah, well, I thank Chloe for linking me up with you.
For Coley, yes, and Coley Weber. All right, everybody, take care and follow Jim Goodall.